AEW All Out took place last night in Chicago, just 2 weeks after their Wembley Stadium show. Bad Blood came a month early. This was the real Bad Blood last night. We got a lot more blood than we're going to get in a month, I'll tell you that. This show, at times, felt more like a snuff film than an actual wrestling show. We had multiple instances of attempted murder. We had blood. We had gore. We had people being suffocated with plastic bags. We had people being stabbed with hypodermic needles. I thought it was an excellent show, though. I mean, definitely more positive than negative. They are remarkably consistent when it comes to the quality of their pay-per-views. I mean, you could set your watch to it. Swerve Strickland against Hangman Adam Page. I said coming into the show, even before they announced that it was going to close the show, which made sense because it had the lights out, unsanctioned stipulations added to it. But I said, this is the real main event. This right here, this story, this feud, this has been building now for almost a full year. And it was last year at Full Gear. I called it a symphony of violence, is what these two went out there and had. Last night was the sequel. It's rare but not impossible, that the sequel could be better than the original. I wouldn't say that. I don't know that it was any more violent than their Texas death match. What I would say about this main event last night is that it came as advertised. And Hangman finally wins one, even though Swerve is still up 2 wins to none because as an unsanctioned match, it does not count towards their win-loss records. I should mention, by the way, those win-loss records have been scrubbed from the AEW roster page. They no longer list people's win-loss records like they've always done. Between that and all the over-the-top violence we saw on this show, I think it's safe to say the sports-based presentation that Tony Khan has talked about in the past is no longer a thing in AEW. But it was disturbing. In a word, that main event. It was disturbing, it was unsettling, and that was the point, given where this feud has gone. Some of the stuff was over the top, like the needle spot, which was not needed. But in a blood feud, you get blood, and when you have someone as unhinged as Hangman has been, and someone as sick as Swerve is, you are going to get a match that is sick and twisted and disturbing, and that's exactly what this was. But there were no championships that changed hands on this show. Every champion that defended retained their title. That was not a surprise with really any of the champions. Bryan Danielson just won the AEW World Championship 2 weekends ago. Will Ospreay just won back the international title 2 weekends ago. Did you honestly expect either one of them to drop their belts so soon? It never felt like the Young Bucks titles were in any serious jeopardy. Okada was not dropping his Continental title in a 4-way match. And Mercedes was not losing to Hikaru Shida. That was the most disappointing thing on the entire show. That's 2 in a row now where the TBS title match has been the weakest part of the card. But they also shot a major angle coming out of the AEW Championship match involving the Blackpool Combat Club. Was wondering where Jon Moxley was going with this new story. Is he even a part of the BCC anymore? Well, we got our answer. The answer is yes. But the BCC is going to look a little bit different going forward because Bryan Danielson was excommunicated from the group. That was the most shocking thing on the entire show. And I will get into it and all the details and where things may be headed here as we go along. One thing I will comment on from the 0-hour pre-show, they had a bunch of matches on the pre-show. They were fine. But the one thing I wanted to talk about here, that there was a segment involving Mariah May. Tony Schiavone brought out Sky Blue for the first time since she broke her ankle on Collision back in July. This being in her hometown of Chicago, they wanted to get her a role on the show. So she came out, she was on crutches. She said that it's just a waiting game as far as when she'll be able to return. I mean, she had surgery for a broken ankle. We're not going to be seeing her back in the ring for a while yet. But Mariah May came out. Earlier in the day, word started to get around that they were going to do a segment where Mariah May was finally, after teasing it the last couple of weeks, she was finally going to have her championship celebration to celebrate her win over Toni Storm at All In. And it was a little odd because why wouldn't you save this for TV? If they're going to do this on the pay-per-view, maybe they have something big planned. Well, all this was the two of them exchanging some very cringeworthy insults about blowing people in the Windy City, and Mariah saying that she is not celebrating here in Chicago. She's not going to have her celebration here in this city. And then she kicked the crutches away from Sky Blue and knocked her down, started raining punches down, and was about to hit her with one of the crutches when Queen Aminata made the save and chased her away, which now I'm sure will lead to a match. This was a terrible segment. First of all, they don't really seem to know what to do with Mariah now that she finally beat Toni and she won the title. But I just thought this segment, the dialogue in this segment, the insults back, this was just awful. I mean, good to see Sky Blue, and I wish her well. And I love Mariah, but I thought this sucked. Now, before we get into the main card here, we're going to play a little drinking game as we go along here. So just keep that in mind. You'll see why. You'll pick up on a certain theme here as we go along with this review. But they opened the show with MJF against Daniel Garcia, and they had a hell of a match, I thought, until that finish. Garcia was bleeding, and this was only the opening match. Drink! MJF ripped the bandage off his head, and he bit him, which opened him up. I thought the intensity that Garcia brought here was appropriate given the nature of their feud. It got technical. They had some great submission exchanges down the stretch. You had MJF with the Boston Crab, countered into the label lock, which got countered into a crossface, which got countered into a sharpshooter by Garcia. That got countered into the Salt of the Earth armbar. Back and forth they went. Garcia brought MJF to the corner. He wanted an avalanche pile driver, but MJF got out of it. That's important to remember when we get to the end of the match here. So then MJF pulls the referee in front of him, delivers a low blow, which the referee did not see, and he rolled up Daniel Garcia for the win. Now, they had a very good match, and I know that this is MJF's modus operandi, you know, him cheating and low blowing, but the finish just fell very flat to me. So it was a very good match. We got to the finish, and then it was like, ugh, you know, more of the same. Even though I did predict an MJF win, I did not see him losing here. I don't know why. I don't know why people didn't put more, you know, thought into the idea of, you know, do you really see AEW beating MJF 2 in a row? And maybe they were. Maybe they were going to. I mean, I saw that Ibu from Wrestle Purist said the original finish was going to go the other way. But when the match was over, MJF, he wanted a handshake. And Daniel Garcia initially accepted, which made no sense. Except that MJF tried to kick him low for the second time. Garcia saw it coming and caught his leg. So I guess he was expecting it. He was playing along. And so he kicked MJF low. And then he dragged him to the corner. He spiked him with an avalanche pile driver. So Daniel Garcia did, in the end, finally get his revenge, even though he lost. Now, Ibu from Wrestle Purist, he said the original finish was to have been a clean win for Daniel Garcia. But because he has not signed a new deal yet, and they have every reason to believe that he will sign, but he hasn't put pen to paper yet, so they decided to play it safe, and they gave MJF the win instead, even though, again, they fully expect Garcia to stay with AEW. And so do I. But they didn't want to take the chance of having him go over on one of their biggest stars, and then he up and leaves for WWE. And they shot the post-match angle because MJF is apparently going away for a little while to film a movie, which is not ideal at a time when they're already missing Kenny Omega and Jay White and Samoa Joe and Adam Copeland, among many others. The thing with AEW, though, is for all the names, I mean, I could sit here and list a laundry list of names that are out injured. I didn't mention Will Hobbs, Sky Blue. I mean, there's a bunch of people who were hurt. But they have a very deep bench. You know, their bench is deep enough that Tony Khan should have no problem occupying MJF's spot while he's gone. I wouldn't expect him to be gone for that long anyway. But that's why they shot the angle that they did. The Young Bucks defended the AEW Tag Team titles against Claudio Castagnoli and Wheeler Yuta. I thought the action was fine. I just could not get into this. I mean, this was just, it was slapped together on the go-home show on Wednesday night. And at no point did I ever feel the Bucks belts were in any kind of real jeopardy. Not that I felt that for really any of the title matches on this show, but there's just something about these matches lately with the Bucks as the tag team champions. I just don't care. I just don't. Claudio got almost 20 revolutions on a giant swing on Matt Jackson. Nick flew in with a series of super kicks. Matt went to the top with Yuta. Claudio sprung up with an uppercut and a huge superplex. Claudio tossed Yuta from the ropes onto Matt, who got his knees up, and Matt then hooked Yuta for the 3 count to retain the titles, while Nick was holding off Claudio to prevent him from breaking up the pin. A good match. There was, I mean, as a match, it was good. You know, maybe even very good, but hardly anything memorable. Unlike the next match, which saw Will Ospreay defending his AEW International title against the Bastard Pac. I mentioned Claudio, I mentioned Yuta, 2/3 of the Trios champions. This was the other third. Pac was looking for 2 belts coming out of this show. Right from the opening bell, before they even touched, the crowd was electric for this. They saw this as a very big deal. These people knew that they were in for something special. And they quickly flashed backstage to show Ricochet. He was watching the match on a TV screen. How do you even recap something like this? I mean, it was big spot after big spot after big spot. Pac, for example, early on hit a Sky Twister press to the floor. Moments later, Ospreay came back with one of his own. There was a spot where Pac dropped Ospreay on the back of his neck on the apron. Just a brutal release German suplex, folded him up. Hardly the only time in this match that Will Ospreay got dropped on the back of his neck. That was bad enough, but then he followed it up with a poison rana on the apron and spiked him right on top of his head. Pac goes for the broken arrow. Ospreay gets the knees up. Somehow they just kept escalating and the crowd went crazier and crazier and crazier for it. Pac hit another poison rana, tried for a third. Ospreay avoided it. He hit one of his own. Then he flew in with the hidden blade for the closest of near falls. Pac crotched Ospreay and was looking for an avalanche poison rana, but Ospreay landed on his feet. He backed up into the corner. He charged in with another hidden blade. He nailed it. And again, Pac kicked out. So an Os Cutter connects. Pac counters the Stormbreaker attempt into a Snap Hurricane Rana. Ospreay, though, rolls through into a Styles Clash, hits another hidden blade, flush to the back of the head, and he picks up the win. This is what you would call the video game match, where you have 2 people doing things that human beings should not be able to do, but somehow they find a way. It will be a polarizing match for some, going spot to spot like that, Ospreay landing on his neck every other move, and probably, I would say, had 2 or 3 too many kickouts from big moves, but if you're going to do a match like this, there are only a handful of guys who could pull it off as smoothly as these 2 did. And really, it's Will Ospreay and Pac. And you could throw Ricochet in there too. And he looked happy when they cut back to him when the match was over. He's probably thinking, man, I can't wait to get involved in this. But this was, I would call it, this was an incredible spot fest. Exactly what I was expecting from these 2. Some people might be upset by me calling it that. I don't even mean it in a derogatory way. I think Will Ospreay is the best in the world right now. Bell to bell. The man can do no wrong. He can go beat for beat with anybody in that ring. And I guarantee you, even in WWE, if you were to poll people, who from the other place would you love to get in the ring with? If you can pick one name, I guarantee you the majority would choose Will Ospreay. He's that guy. He's him. He's the one you look at and go, if you're a wrestler, I think, and go, hey, I would love to get in the ring with that guy. The man shits out great matches. But it was a spot fest. I mean, that's what it was. Just calling it what it is. And now we wait for Ospreay and Ricochet to have theirs. They had a confrontation in the back after. Ricochet was not happy that Ospreay brought up his name and was talking about him just collecting a paycheck. Ospreay told him, go rack up some wins, bruv. Go win some matches, bruv. Rack up some wins and then you and I could do the deal. Even Full Gear feels too soon to me to do that match. Ricochet just got there. And if the idea is that he's going to be the one to take that title from Ospreay, and I think he very well could, then they absolutely need to stretch that out until next year. But this right here, this match was the show stealer for me. This was the match of the night. And I felt bad for whoever had to follow this because it just felt like an exercise in futility. But to their credit, the ladies did just that. They managed to keep the crowd alive in a spot where they normally would die a death. It was Willow Nightingale one-on-one with Chris Statlander, her former best friend, in a Chicago street fight. Willow got powerbombed through the Spanish announce desk early. Statlander pulled a table out from underneath the ring and set it up on the floor. Put Willow on top of it, went to the top rope for a dive. Willow moved. Statlander crashed and burned through the table. So Willow got up. She pounced Statlander through the ringside barricade. They fought up to the stage. Statlander suplexed Willow on the stage and then called for Stokely Hathaway, who was still back down at ringside, telling him, go to the back, get the stuff. And he did, and he came back with a trash can filled with all kinds of weapons. So Statlander grabbed a barbed wire baseball bat. She took a swing, missed Willow, who responded by breaking a light tube over Statlander's head. And Willow chased off Hathaway. The camera followed her to give Statlander some time to get some color, because when we came back to Chris Statlander, she was busted open. Drink! Statlander speared Willow off the stage through some tables that were set up on the floor. Back in the ring, Willow grabbed a chain, raked Statlander's bloody wound with it. Then we had Statlander pouring thumbtacks all over the ring. She went for an axe kick. Willow moved, and Statlander did the splits on the tacks. She got tacks in her lady parts. I don't think I said that loud enough for the neighborhood to hear me. She got tacks in her lady parts. So Willow followed that with a Death Valley driver onto the tacks. All of this, by the way, was only good for a near fall. Then, this transitioned basically from a street fight to a chain match. Statlander hit a tombstone, and then she wrapped the chain around Willow's mouth. She wrenched back on it until Willow flailed her hand around for the submission, and that was the end of that. I thought they killed it. I thought they killed each other, but I thought they killed the match. I said in my predictions, the thing I was most looking forward to from these two was how physical they are when they're in the ring together. And they got as physical as I've ever seen them in any match that they've had. So as hardcore matches go, this was the best of all the ones the women have ever had in AEW. There have been some really good ones. There have been some bloody ones. Going all the way back to Britt Baker and Thunder Rosa, this right here, I would say, was the best that we have seen from the women when it comes to these types of matches in AEW. It had enough brutality to feel like a fitting end for their feud, save for the fact that Willow tried to pin Statlander in like the opening minute of the match. That didn't make any sense. And also for the fact that this is not actually the end, because Statlander is still owed a shot at Willow's CMLL Women's Championship, which was not on the line in this match, because in storyline, the CMLL title is not defended under such stipulations. But Statlander did win that Eliminator match all those weeks ago on Dynamite, so she is owed a championship match. So even though this felt like a blow-off and you had the babyface actually submitting, Statlander is now up 2-0 on Willow and is owed one more match. So we are not done yet. We had Kazuchika Okada defending his AEW Continental Championship in a four-way match against Orange Cassidy, Mark Briscoe, and Konosuke Takeshita. I didn't see how it happened, but Briscoe came up bleeding from the forehead. Drink! Okada and Takeshita, they dispatched the other two with released Germans, and then we got our first stare down between Okada and Takeshita, which got a great reaction from the crowd. I thought their forearm exchange looked really weak. Looked like they were giving each other love taps. But Okada hit his drop kick, wanted a Rainmaker. Takeshita denied him, countered into a Blue Thunder Bomb. Briscoe dropped Takeshita later with a brutal J-Driller. Okada pulled Briscoe to the floor to break up the pin. Froggy Bow missed on Takeshita, who got the knees up and hit the power drive knee. Beach Break connected on Takeshita. Cassidy wanted an orange punch. Takeshita, though, delivered one of his own, hit a wild lariat. Okada threw Takeshita to the floor, connected on a Rainmaker to Briscoe. Cassidy ran in, though, got a roll-up for two. Okada held onto the wrist, though, and flattened Orange Cassidy with a Rainmaker to retain the Continental title. Fun match. Cassidy ate the pin, which is great, because that means Don Callis can argue that Takeshita was never pinned, and therefore he deserves a rematch. Everything they did here screams singles match to me. They did a good job, I thought, of keeping them apart. Not entirely, but enough that they didn't give too much away. And when they did face off, the crowd was into it. Tony Khan could hear it. Tony Khan could see it. These people wanted to see these two guys go toe-to-toe. I am still waiting to see New Japan Okada. He has yet to have that one really memorable classic match since coming to AEW. I need somebody to bring out that version of Okada. Even asshole Okada, who bullied Kaito Kiyomiya. I think Takeshita can do that. And not only can he do that, But if they don't know when Kenny Omega may be able to come back, he's still a ways away from coming back. And that's not the sort of injury and surgery that you rush back from. So if Kenny Omega is TBD and he's not coming back anytime soon, I would seriously consider having Takeshita be the one to take that championship from Okada. It doesn't stop them from doing another Okada-Omega match at some point. And if they want the title on Kenny, eventually, Takeshita has a win over him from last year's All Out. So they could circle back to Omega Takeshita for the Continental title if, in fact, he beats Okada and has the belt. So, in my mind, it works. Now we had Mercedes Moné against Hikaru Shida for the TBS Championship with Camille banned from ringside. Mercedes has had a heater not even 2 months. Okay, it has not even been a full 2 months since Camille debuted. They're already banning her from ringside. How is she supposed to get heat and do her job if you're already taking her out of the equation? Like, that should be saved for 6 months into their run together. But this was also the second straight Mercedes match in as many weeks that left me disappointed. They had the crowd with them a hell of a lot more than Mercedes and Britt Baker did. They even got dueling chants at the beginning of this, but the match was just very clunky. Mercedes was toying with Shida before hitting the three amigos. She wanted a frog splash. Shida got the knees up, hit 3 Falcon arrows, but only got an ear fall. Mercedes blocked the first katana attempt by Shida, and a backstabber connected, but Shida no-sold it, delivered a German suplex, and then threw a knee strike for 2. And then there was a really awkward sequence where Shida threw a katana kick that was supposed to connect. I guess it sort of did, but not really. It did not look good. The second one, which initially I just assumed was a redo because the first one looked so bad. The second one connected flush. And then for whatever reason, she delivered a third one, which again looked like it barely connected. Then she covers Mercedes, and Mercedes kicks out at 1. At 1 from 3 katanas. We got Mercedes Hogan over here. She's hulking up. So she rolls out to the floor. The two of them end up in a tug-of-war for Shida's kendo stick. Shida brings the kendo stick back into the ring. She decides against using it because, of course, if she gets disqualified, she can't win the championship. Mercedes sidesteps a Meteora, chop blocks the knee. That leads to the terrible Monet Maker finish for the win. I don't know what the hell they were going for with that finishing sequence, but I thought it made Shida look very weak. And the kendo stick spot made her look very dumb. Weak and dumb is never a good combination for a babyface. But this was the weakest match on the entire card. It was very disappointing. I was expecting more from these two. You know, I said the same thing about her match at All In. It was very disappointing. It was the weakest match on the entire card. What the hell's going on here? I don't know. We had Bryan Danielson against the TNT champion Jack Perry for the AEW World Heavyweight Championship. Tony Khan must be dipping into that Warner Brothers Discovery money early because this is the second time he has used Final Countdown for Danielson in the span of 2 weeks. Actually, in the post-show scrum, I may as well mention this now, in the post-show scrum, Tony said that he is 100% confident in a deal happening with Warner Brothers Discovery. He said he has not put pen to paper on the actual deal yet. They're still in discussions. But he puts the likelihood of something being announced within the next 30 days. He puts that likelihood at 90%. But he is 100% confident that the deal will get done and that AEW will have a home on TBS and TNT for many years to come. But there is still no deal. You know, they've got their 5-year anniversary Dynamite coming up on October 2nd. That would be a fine time to announce something. I hope not. I hope it doesn't happen that night. I'm not going to be here that night. I will not be streaming that night. But I expect something big to happen that night because that's how it always works. But Jim Ross joined the commentary booth for the final 2 matches. This was one of his better nights, I thought. I was worried about him after those sit-down interviews with Swerve and Danielson in the lead-up to All In. He did not look good. He did not sound good. But he was back in form on this show. Now, a lot of people poo-pooed the idea of Jack Perry getting a world championship match. They said that they couldn't take it seriously. You know, look at him. He looks like a child. He's wrestling for the world title. This was one of the best matches of his entire career. Easily the best match he has had since he turned heel. I would not rank it above the Four Pillars match at last year's Double or Nothing, but this was, I thought, an excellent match. Perry got good heat. He did not get the kind of nuclear overwhelming heat like I was expecting him to get here in Chicago, but he got good heat. Danielson went in for a corner charge when Perry pulled the referee into the line of fire, and we got a ref bump. So that brought out the Young Bucks, and they hit the TK driver, and Danielson's arms went limp. They set up for the EVP trigger, but Claudio and Yuta, they ran out to chase them off through the crowd. Danielson came back. He turned him inside out with the Busaiku knee. It took 2 more Busaiku knees. Perry just held his arms outstretched and smirked before taking the final one. Defiant until the very end. Stupid is more like it. I mean, he looked stupid just standing there taking the move like that. I will say this, though. Jack Perry's sells of the knee strike were the best I've ever seen. They look great. Every time he got turned inside out, that looked great. And Danielson finally got the pin after connecting on the 3rd one. So you can say that Danielson did not put this kid over as strongly as he could without him actually winning the match. Even though he's still a heel doing heel things, Perry took the big moves. He kept kicking out. I mean, that was a recurring theme throughout the entire show, kicking out of one too many big moves. But I thought Perry looked as strong as he could in a losing effort here. And now all the people who kvetched about Perry being the #1 contender, you can rest easy, because it lasted all of a week. Like I told you, it would be over quickly and Danielson would move on to the next. He just needed somebody to beat in his first defense. And Jack Perry made sense in so much as he has a pinfall win over Bryan Danielson from Anarchy in the Arena. This was Danielson's way of avenging that loss. The real story came after the match was over. Killswitch appeared in the ring behind Danielson and laid him out. And then he stares a hole through Jack Perry, his former friend, his former tag team partner, who looked very confused as to why the dinosaur was in the ring. Christian Cage's music hits. And here comes Christian with the contract in hand for a guaranteed world championship match that he won in the Casino Gauntlet 2 weeks ago. He's got Nick Wayne with him. He's got Mother Wayne with him. But before he could get into the ring, Jon Moxley appears at ringside, and he's standing there, and he is blocking his path. And then, out from the crowd, here comes Claudio, here comes Wheeler Yuta, here comes Pac. They have formed a wall at ringside. So this answers my question from the other night about whether Moxley was still part of the Blackpool Combat Club. And so with that, the patriarchy retreated. Moxley then gets into the ring. He gives Danielson a long hug, which was a giant red flag, because how often does Jon Moxley show this type of emotion? Unless he was about to murder someone. All the members of the Blackpool Combat Club, they come into the ring, they raise their arms in celebration, and then it happened. Claudio blindsides Danielson with an uppercut that knocked Danielson down on his ass. Although he no-sold it. He went down, but he no-sold it. He just looked up at Claudio with a shocked look on his face. He didn't actually sell the uppercut. He's just looking up at him going, dude, what are you doing? He was in a state of shock. Then Moxley pulls out a plastic bag and places it over Danielson's head, suffocating him as Pac is holding back Wheeler Yuta, who is nearly in tears. He has no idea what's going on. Clearly was not clued in about this. Marina Shafir shows up. She boots Bryce Remsburg out of the ring. Jim Ross on commentary is really putting this over big and selling this. How disgusted he is, and this has no place in wrestling. In my 50 years, I've never seen anything this disgusting before. I mean, you would think he was shooting, but he was just doing a very good job of putting over, the magnitude of what we were seeing here. Eddie Kingston warned us. Eddie Kingston warned us for years about Claudio being a scumbag. We just didn't see it. Eddie Kingston was right. Eddie Kingston was probably also throwing his remote control through the fucking window watching this when he saw Moxley pull that bag out, because he has been trying to pitch the plastic bag spot for years. And Tony Khan has consistently shot him down and said, no, we're not doing the plastic bag. Because he wanted to pay homage to Terry Funk, doing the same thing to Ric Flair during their feud in the NWA. Charles Mason does this shit all the time in House of Glory. He put a plastic bag over my head. I've been on the receiving end of that, and let me tell you, it's no fun. Especially when you've got tape over your mouth and your hands are tied behind your back. Danielson should consider himself lucky he only had the bag. This went on for an uncomfortable amount of time. Moxley is just holding the bag over Danielson's head, and he is just stomping and flailing around. I mean, he should have gone out a lot sooner. I mean, literally, this was going on for like 2 or 3 minutes straight. Meanwhile, the fans start chanting, "This is murder." He finally lets go, and the BCC minus Wheeler Yuta all exit through the crowd. Yuta ran over instead to tend to Danielson. And then doctors came out. They had an oxygen tank. They put the mask on Danielson. They're trying to revive him. My first observation was, why wouldn't Moxley just step aside and allow Christian to cash in his contract and win the championship? But then they didn't want Danielson to drop the belt. So it's like, all right, cool. But it looks equally goofy that Christian did not come running right back out after the BCC left. That's a logic gap that I can't ignore that. My second observation was, look at the people who attacked Danielson. All former WWE talents. The one member of the BCC who did not attack Bryan and had no idea what was going on was Wheeler Yuta, the only guy, the one guy who did not work for WWE. Now, maybe that's a coincidence, but Moxley did tell Tony Schiavone 2 weeks ago, this isn't your company anymore. Which felt like a message to Tony Khan, since Schiavone is Tony's proxy out there on most weeks. But it could also be a message to Bryan Danielson, who is the champion, and we know Danielson is very loyal to Tony Khan. This is not your company anymore. And it only feeds further into the idea that Shane McMahon is orchestrating this entire thing. That'll be another thing that they say for the 5-year anniversary show when I'm not there. I guarantee it. It'll be the debut of Shane McMahon. Look, it was definitely a shocking angle. What happens with Yuta now? That's another question. Yuta is caught in the middle of this family feud. He's still 1/3 of the Trios champions. Not that the Trios titles mean much, but, you know, he's still holding titles with these people. It also makes me wonder if Moxley has been calling out Darby Allin on TV because he wants to make the pitch for him to join the Blackpool Combat Club. He talked the other night about wrestling Darby for the first time many years ago and realizing how special this kid is. He was putting Darby over, but then he said, look, my patience is wearing thin. I just want to talk. Darby has a championship match coming up with Bryan Danielson for Grand Slam. So this makes things even more interesting now. And honestly, that's what AEW needs. That's what they need more of. The Elite angle has been a failure. In terms of generating interest in the product, it has failed. The one person that angle has benefited more than any other is Jack Perry. But the angle itself has failed to generate any new interest in the product like Tony Khan thought that it would, or else he would not have taken a bump for it. Tony Khan saved his very first bump for that angle. He doesn't do that unless he has high expectations for where this angle is going to go. Eric Bischoff got powerbombed by Kevin Nash off the stage in WCW because he thought it would really drive up interest in the NWO angle and make people think, holy shit, this is a real invasion. So he took one for the team. He took a hell of a bump. Vince McMahon took his first stunner bump from Steve Austin because he was a star on the rise who was going to be his top babyface. Tony Khan took a TK driver and got dumped on his head because he thought this angle was going to carry the company through the summer. If anything, it had go-away heat with a lot of viewers. Maybe they'll find more success with this angle. We'll see when the Dynamite rating comes in on Thursday. Because this should generate a lot of attention going into that television show this week. But with Swerve supposedly taking time off after what happened last night in the main event, maybe the idea is to put the belt on Darby Allin. There's been talk about AEW wanting to put the championship on Darby, whether it's this month or at some point in the near future. Just so happens he's got a world title match coming up, so it could very well happen on the 25th. Or maybe the idea is to do Danielson against Moxley with Moxley winning the belt to really cement his heel turn. But having Jon Moxley be the one to end Bryan Danielson's full-time run, I mean, that would just feel like a waste to me. Why waste that spot on Moxley who doesn't need it? I would rather see someone like Hangman take the belt than Moxley. That was the actual main event of the show, because this next match was unsanctioned, which means it does not count towards either man's win-loss record and is not officially recognized. It was an unsanctioned lights-out steel cage match between Swerve Strickland and Hangman Adam Page. Both men were escorted to the ring by security guards. I spotted Davey Bang out there as one of the security guards escorting Swerve. He just debuted for House of Glory in Chicago the other night. Davey Bang and August Matthews. Great team. When it comes to blood feuds, it does not get any bloodier than this one in the history of the company, or more personal. Remember, it started with Swerve breaking into Hangman's house, and then it escalated to arson, with Hangman burning down this man's childhood home. Now he can add an attempted murder charge to all that, all in the span of 3 days. That's very impressive. And not the first attempted murder we saw on this show, I should point out. But remember, AEW is the safest wrestling company in the world. Tony Khan said so. Hangman brought some barbed wire to the ring with him. Once both men were inside, the cage was still raised. They hadn't lowered it yet. And Swerve immediately took Page out to the floor. Prince Nana slid a table into the ring. He slid a plastic bin into the ring. Anything he could get his hands on before that cage lowered. Swerve was holding Hangman's head underneath the bottom rope, waiting for the cage to come down so it could decapitate him. But he was able to avoid doom. And finally, the cage lowered, and they were locked inside like animals. Hangman got a staple gun out of the bin. And he starts stapling Swerve's chest, which he no-sold, just like he did in their Texas Death Match when he started stapling himself. Then Swerve got the gun and started stapling Hangman's back. He stapled the photos, by the way, to Hangman's chest of his family. Because he had, remember in the video package they aired, when he was standing outside his childhood home, telling everybody how he had just bought the house? He had photos in his hand from when he was a kid of his family. So he had those photos tucked into his tights. He pulled them out and he stapled them to Hangman's cheek and his chest. And then he yanked them off. So Hangman used the barbed wire that he had brought to the ring with him. He wrapped it around his arm, clotheslined Swerve with it. Both men were already bleeding. Drink, if you're still conscious. For some reason, Paul Turner admonished Hangman over trying to use a steel chair, even though this was an unsanctioned match with no rules. And they were, I mean, these guys were killing each other with staple guns, with barbed wire, with bricks. Evidently, a chair is just, that's a bridge too far. All this to set up a very clunky buckshot spot where Turner, he bent down to go pick the chair up. And he had to stand there, like hunched over, like taking forever to pick this chair up just so Swerve could roll off of his back into a clothesline. It may have sounded good in theory when they were planning this match out, but in execution, yeah, this did not work. There was a brutal lawn dart spot where Swerve sent Hangman hurtling face first into a chair that was wedged in the ropes. That got the first 2 count of the match. Then out came the cinder block. All while Jim Ross and Taz on commentary reminisced about their days of taking cinder block shots to the face and the crotch, respectively. Swerve hit a vertebreaker onto the cinder block, which left an ugly scrape on Hangman's back. We got a Swerve stomp to Hangman through a table. Hangman came back with a piece of charred wood, we were told, from Swerve's house that burned up the other day. He tried to impale Swerve with it. Swerve took it away from him and started stabbing Hangman with the wood. And then he looked down at the wooden spike in his hands and he had tears in his eyes because he realized that this was a part of his childhood home that, no longer exists. And then he tried to finish it, but Hangman was able to powerbomb him onto the cinder block. Holy shit. I don't know what that thing was made of. It looked brutal beyond belief. Still, though, it only got him a 2 count. Swerve battled back with a couple of house call kicks, scaled the cage, got cut off, though, by Hangman, who powerbombed him. Not from the top of the cage, but off the top rope, which is bad enough. Page then demanded that Swerve beg for mercy, and he's jabbing the side of a chair into his head. Swerve just got to his feet, he laughed, and then he collapsed back to the mat. So Page then goes over. He pulls the grill out of Swerve's mouth. I'm not gonna lie, I thought he pulled his retainer out. It was a gold grill, and I'm sitting here thinking, fuck, don't you ever clean that thing? So then, out comes the needle. Now, I took 4 of those to the gums a few weeks ago. I had my first root canal. I'll tell you what, the root canal actually wasn't so bad. It gets a bad reputation. The worst part were the injections. I hate needles. My least favorite trap from the second Saw movie was the Pit of Needles. Hangman pulls out a hypodermic needle, and he jabs it inside of Swerve's cheek. It looked like he was trying to jab it through the, deep enough into the skin that it would come out the other side. I don't think it did. But he tried. I felt this in my soul. I had sympathy pains watching this. And so with the needle sticking out of Swerve's mouth, Hangman finally hits the kill shot with the chair. He gives him a chair shot to the skull. How nice of him, by the way, to try to numb Swerve's face with the injection so that he wouldn't feel a thing when he got hit with the chair. What a nice guy. The thing is, though, you got to give it time, though, for the Novocaine to wear in. But they panned out to a wide shot just as he struck the final blow to avoid showing how sanded down the chair was. It sounded like a gunshot going off, though. And that was it. It was all Paul Turner had to see to call for the stoppage. He awarded the match to Hangman by knockout. As Hangman was leaving, he started to make his way back down to the ring, but he stopped himself and thought better of it. I read this as, and I could be wrong here, my theory on this is that he was going back to the ring to check on Swerve. Almost like he realized what he had done, but then he stopped himself. And then on stage, he let out a primal scream as the show came to a close. This is what Swerve created. I mean, this is what he has turned Hangman into. He has turned him into a monster. Maybe there was a moment there on that ramp where a little bit of the old Hangman came out before he changed his mind and went back up to the stage. I don't know. But I said that their Texas Death Match was the most violent match that I've ever seen. And I stand by that. It still is. I'm not going to rank them as far as match quality because these all run the same to me. I don't even know how do you grade something like that? How do you rank something like this? What I will say is that this lived up to the billing. You may not like it. It may not be for you, but it was billed as an unsanctioned lights out cage match. You knew exactly what you were getting coming into this. And that's exactly what they gave us. Nobody who paid $50 to watch this show or whatever, $20, depending on what service you watched it on, nobody paid for this show and is going to come out of this going, I really wanted to see that lights out unsanctioned cage match in the main event, but it wasn't really violent enough for me. I feel like I was let down. You can't say that. You got exactly what was advertised. Although the needle spot was completely unnecessary. The needle did not play any real role in the finish, other than for the shock value. It was like they thought, what can we do just to shock the people for the sake of shocking them? But remember the story coming into this. Swerve did not think that Hangman had it in him to go this route. This was all Swerve's doing. Really from the beginning when he broke into the man's house. But he is the one who roused this side of Hangman up. This was a horror movie of his own making. This was a spectacle. And I hope I never see anything like it ever again. Hangman finally wins one, even though Swerve remains 2-0 in this feud officially. This felt like the end for now. Swerve may be taking time off after this. He better. He better be taking at least a week off. I don't want to see this man back on my television screen on Wednesday after what we saw here. Question is, where does Hangman go now? I said it earlier in the review. I would put the championship on him. Either at Wrestle Dream or Full Gear. Honestly, Full Gear, I mean, that's kind of his show. It would make sense that it would be a big night for him. But this was an excellent show on the whole. AEW always delivers when it comes to their pay-per-views, when it comes to their in-ring action. MJF and Garcia, they had a great match. Pac and Ospreay was excellent. Statlander and Willow tore it up. Danielson and Jack Perry had a great match. And the main event was the violent spectacle that it was advertised to be.